I can still see us sitting under the porch light. Daddy plucking his banjo, and Johnny taking Mama by the hand and dancing her around the porch, making her eyes sparkle like the stars. And then there was me, Jade. It seems I was named after this precious jewel by my mother.
Welcome to Manning the Gate Publishing. I am Bonnie Manning, the CEO of Manning the Gate, and today I have a special guest and a lovely friend, Lynn Marie Brunk, and she is the voice of Tekoa Manning, which is his name. Lynn Marie Brunk does all types of genres and audiobooks, and she is a voice actor. So welcome, Lynn.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Always good to talk.
Lynn just did a new audio recording of Polishing Jade, my first novel.
Yeah, here it is.
Yay. And you did such a wonderful job with all the different characters in that book. But before we jump into that, tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and how we met.
Okay, sure. Okay, well, I am, this is my second career to do voice acting. This is not what I started off with, many, many years ago. I was a music teacher for a long, long time. I taught both in public schools, I taught in a Christian school, I taught in a special needs school, and I homeschooled my own kids. So I kind of, over 30 years, I've been teaching the whole time, but I wasn't in school specifically that whole 30 years. 15 of it was in a actual set classroom outside of my home. So I've got a little bit of experience there, but I became disabled with a mobility issue. So I got to a point where I had to find something that I could do sitting down. And that because I just couldn't not work. I had to do something. So my son, he's in his 30s now, he's grown, and I homeschooled him. He's dyslexic, profoundly dyslexic. And we didn't have it diagnosed as a child, but we found out as an adult, and it makes sense now that he's autistic as well. So
Wow.
I read to him a lot, you might guess, through his growing up. We read chapter books when he was little, and I mean, I have a daughter as well. She got to hear all this too, but he was the one who needed it, as far as because he was unable to read them for himself. So we then discovered Audible when he hit middle school, and he started listening to books such as The Lord of the Rings and the Chronicles of Narnia. So he was listening to very, very serious books at a young age. He's always been
Wow.
very oral. Well, we were living in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and we decided we wanted to homestead. We just did not want to live in the city anymore. So we had been looking at properties for a while, and we chose Kentucky, which is ironic that you're from Kentucky because I didn't know you then.
I
Well,
know.
I did know you, but I didn't know. You know what I mean? Anyway, we were
Right.
looking at properties in Tennessee and Kentucky. And my son, being the profound listener that he is, was listening to many podcasts on homesteading. So he was listening to a podcast about a homesteader whose wife did what I'm doing. She built a studio and she narrated audiobooks, and they were using that as part of their income to keep the farm running. He says, "Mom, you've been reading to me your whole life. You should try this." So I
Wow.
thought, okay, I'll look into it. I was studying to be a medical coder. Because again, I needed something I could do sitting down. I'm good at it, but I didn't like it. I don't think I would have liked to have actually done that as a career for my second half of my life. So when I discovered this, I found out what I didn't know, which was a lot. I got coaching, I bought equipment, and once we moved I started off in my master bedroom closet,
Wow.
which is what a lot of narrators do, because it's this that clothes dampen the sound. But eventually, when we moved to Kentucky, we built a studio. So now I have a beautiful, beautiful studio that I just love because I can move, I can spread my arms, I have a standing desk, I can stand if I need to, I can sit, I can be on a bar stool, I can put it whatever level I want, which gives me freedom to work on different characters. And because when you're doing characters, sometimes you take on their physical while you're narrating. So,
Wow.
all that being said, that's how I got into this business. I've been doing it now for 2.5 years.
It's fascinating. And I love too the way your son the one you were trying to help has the aha moment. Hey,
Yes.
mom, you've been reading to me your whole life. That's like so precious that it makes me want to cry. Just the thought, too, that long after you and I are both gone,
Hmm.
our
Yeah,
voice is still out there. If our children wanted to listen to one of your audiobooks and hear
it
your voice
could.
one night, so precious to think
Yes.
about. Um, but
I even read his
anyway,
college. Well, he went to tech school. He got an HVAC certificate, and I even read his college stuff to him. So, I mean, I really have been reading to him his entire life.
wow. Yeah, and also I just connect with you because I was became disabled at 40, a little bit before that, but
Hmm.
being unable to work and do something, especially when you're a creative human being, writing has been such a gift for me. So I really did connect with you when you were talking about that because when people say you should get out and go for a brisk walk, well,
Right.
I would love to, but
Yeah, it just doesn't work that way.
right. And so I think that it gives us an outlet, and it is such a blessing
Hmm.
for me.
Gives you a reason to get up in the morning. I mean, we all have a purpose, but it helps you use your creative energies that God gave you and get it to the people.
And you are also connecting with different authors who are writing in different genres. And
Hmm.
so, how do you choose? And
Well, I have made it a policy for myself that I am very careful what I choose in that I don't do anything erotically spicy or with language that sometimes there's going to be language. If it fits in
right,
with the character, it sometimes there just has to be because it really fits in with the situation. But I try to keep things clean. And what I tell a publisher when I'm working with them is I don't want to do anything that would make one of my former students blush.
that's good. I like that. Well, and I'm thankful for that because you are basically the voice for all of my books except one.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
so, thank you for that.
It's been fun.
Yes. I remember the day that you reached out, and I I guess you had sent me a sample eventually.
Eventually, yeah. I don't think right away. I think I just emailed you because I'd seen you. I mean, we kind of run in some of the same circles online and I
Right.
saw you there. So, and I had downloaded a couple of your books off of, on my Kindle. I think it was Jumping for Joy was the first one. Jumping for Joy
Yeah.
in the Midst of Sorrow, which is one of my very favorites. And it
Mine
resonated.
too.
So, and I
Well,
noticed you hadn't had it narrated, so I contacted you.
yes. And at some point you sent me a sample of something. Oh,
I think
you
it was that
asked.
one.
Yeah, you said, do you mind if I would record a sample for you to listen to and get back with you? At that point, I had used two audio narrators for my fiction, and that was it. And
Mhm.
one had a very southern accent, right?
Which I've listened to. Yeah, I had listened to
Yeah.
that book.
And she did an excellent job.
Hmm.
But I guess I hadn't really thought about people clearly understanding and the pauses and the way to there's a lot more to this.
Oh, there is. It's
So
acting. Even in a nonfiction book, it's acting. Because in a
really,
nonfiction book, you have to try to take on the persona of the author. Plus, you have to show if there's like an attribute or a quote. You have to make it sound ever so slight, not a lot, but ever so slightly different. I try to have a different voice for when I'm doing biblical quotations. I try to do a lower and quieter voice when I'm doing the biblical notations. But
wow.
that sort of thing. So yeah, and there's a teaching voice even in nonfiction. There's at least four voices that we use in nonfiction. But in character work, in fiction, you have the choice that it's always up to the author. It's not up to the narrator gets a lot of leeway, but it's up to the author if they want the characters read as characters or if they want them to be just slightly differentiated. So, or if you want an accent, or if you don't want an accent. So it can be challenging finding characters.
While you were working on polishing Jade,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
I was just fascinated because I was thinking, how is she keeping all these characters' voices separate and not mixing up some of the female voices? And how are they all going through her head? It was a lot for me. And I've told you this before. I don't like the sound of my voice,
Most of us don't. It took me some getting used to listening to myself.
really.
Oh, yeah. A lot, actually.
So, how do you keep track of all that? Do you have a method or a plan or?
Well, yes, there's a lot of prep, first off. When you always pre-read the book, and while you're pre-reading it, you are taking clues, unless the author gives you a really good rundown of what they're looking for. Because if we're really lucky, if an author says, "I've got this person in mind when I do this, and this is the way I want them to be fast-paced" or whatever, but most of that we don't get. So we read the book, and we glean from the attributes like he said, she said, growly or whatever. We try to find out what their personality is. We look for one of the things I look for is the seminal moment in their life that made them who they are. You come up with a backstory. Actors do this too. And you're coming up with a backstory of who this person is, and then you start working on voices for them. And once you have a voice for them, I keep a master list of all my voices that for each character for each book. So there's a file for each character, and I do a few lines of that character's work and record it. So if they, for instance, I'm doing a right now I'm on book 8 of a series of 12, and people
Wow.
back from book 1 are showing up. So I've got to keep them consistent from the whole
Oh my
series.
goodness.
So I have a master for the whole series that I go
Wow.
back and I listen to. This is how this person sounded. Oh yeah, and then there's placement inside your head, and there's pace, there's characters, there's attributes, and a lot of times certain characters. And I want to ask you this question because this is what I do. Oftentimes, I put somebody in my mind who they remind me of. It could be a real person. It could be somebody on TV. It could be an animated character. So I try to think them as I'm speaking their voice. Do you ever have somebody that you have in mind when you're writing your characters?
That's a good question because so many times with me, I don't really do what probably most authors do to prepare because I just start writing and I don't know. I don't really, sometimes I'll have an idea,
Hmm.
but I'll start writing and the characters will come. And as I am developing the characters, I'll give you some for instances. There was a character in Polishing Jade, I think, that kept a cigar that he chewed on. He never lit it, he never smoked it, but he chewed on
Okay.
the end of it all the time at the poker parties. Uh,
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm thinking. I had to think who that was. Yeah.
I have an ex brother-in-law who's done that his whole ever since I've
Uh-huh.
known him. He never lights it, he doesn't smoke it, he just it's
Uh-huh.
there and
Yeah.
you know. So I think I just bits and pieces from different things in my life. Now the counselor in Walter the Homeless Man,
Hmm.
my other novel, the children art therapist, child psychiatrist, I did take a person that counseled me years ago
Hmm.
and developed that character from her.
Okay.
Um, and then, another thing that's interesting is when I was growing up, there was a family that moved in next door and they moved to Louisville, Kentucky from I want to say Hazard, Kentucky. They were
Okay.
mountain people and
Hmm.
they had a very their accent was, as you know.
I'm learning that accent here.
And so uh they had a son and a daughter, and I would run over there. That was sort of my safe place. And she taught me how to sew. She taught me how to bake. She was
Sounds like
very
Mrs. Ellen
comforting on,
Cotton.
yes, yes. And, but I did not put two and two together. My sister pointed out,
Hmm.
she said, well, I figured out who Miss Ellen Cotton is. It's Phyllis, our next door neighbor. And I
Hmm.
thought, huh, I bet you're right.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And so I know, are we allowed to talk about the new book coming out that you're working on right now that I just read?
oh,
Because I'm
yes.
curious where she came from.
So,
But it's okay. We don't have to talk about her yet because
I
it's new.
I finished a young adult novel. I haven't
Hmm.
marketed the book or talked about it much, and the title is still working. Right now, I think it's Erilyn's Dream Journal. And my great niece, when she was probably 6 years old, or asked me, will you write a book for me? Well,
Ah.
by the time she was 8 years old, she was still asking, Aunt Bonnie,
Hmm.
will you please write a book for me?
Hmm.
And I started the story, and it sat there for a long time. I think I recently finished it a couple years ago, and she's in college now. So
And
it's,
I'm looking forward to when it comes out and I'm able to narrate it.
oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I have books stacking up right now. So, um,
Well, can I bring up this one?
oh, certainly.
I'm excited about this one too. I think, and you're working on another one. I think it's so neat what you're doing for your grandkids.
Well, I'm quite far away from my grandkids, as you know, and it's been that way for about 3 years now. And so Emmett's dinosaur, you know, he's in first grade now, and I think that came out when he was 4 or 5. I don't remember. My
Hmm.
memory's bad. But he has a little brother now named Mason, and Mason just turned 3. And I did not want to have a book for one and not the other. And
Right.
so,
How
yes,
cool to
this,
have a book written just for you.
yeah, well, I hope they enjoy them. And I know Emmett has enjoyed the book. And it's nice to shift from heavy doctrinal theology,
Hmm.
hermeneutics, and all of these things to lighter writing for me. And, we all need a break sometimes. And I'm sure, if you're doing, and I know you've had difficult books with a lot of, didn't you do a recipe book?
I
And
did that for my learning. I didn't actually I have not got a published recipe book, but I've learned how to do recipes. And there's a lot involved.
well, there was one difficult book that you were doing, and I can't think of it right now. Um, but just the words in some of the my series,
Hmm.
just looking up, because
A lot of biblical words.
yeah, and just backing up a little bit when you were talking about how one of the ways authors can help their their narrator is to let them know and give them examples of other voices that they hear this character sounding like.
Hmm.
And I love that because, what other ways are there that authors can help their narrators?
Well, if you have insights, if you have ideas, okay, so first off, not every narrator is the correct narrator for every author because
Thank
the
you.
author has a voice in their head of what they want it to sound like. That doesn't mean there might be five people who could do it, but if say five people audition, one's gonna resonate with that author more than another. And they could both be technically perfect, but it just has to do with what works for that author. So The author's the boss when it comes to this business. So that'd be for the first thing is if you want to make sure you mesh that way. But secondly, if like I had one author I worked with who specifically I did we have to do what's called a 15-minute check. You know about that because we've done a few of them. So
Yes.
whenever we do a new book, we do a 15-minute checkpoint so you can hear what 15 minutes of your book sounds like. We try to make sure we get characters into that. We try to make sure, that anything that's weird gets into that checkpoint. And then that's your chance to say, yes, I like that, or I don't like the way you said this name, or that sort of thing. Okay, I don't like the way you did this character. And I had one author who I had to do my 15-minute check for twice because I was struggling with one of the characters a little bit. And she finally came back to me and she said, I see Tom Selleck in Blue Bloods when I think of this particular character. And when she said that to me, I was able to make it work because that gave me a real good quick visual.
I mean, just when you were talking about doing a series and on book 7, 8, 9, whatever, and you have
Hmm.
to go back to that master file and try to figure out what your voice was doing for this guy that you
Right,
forgot about.
right.
And, I've always been fascinated by people who write series, and I know a lot of them, they want to get the hook and the cliffhanger and get the
Hmm.
next sell, but
Right.
some of them are done very well. I honestly, when I write fiction, I am so tired of the characters. I do not want to talk to them anymore.
Right. I
I
was going
don't
to
want
ask
them in
about
my
that.
living room anymore.
Right. Yeah, they
And
can become kind of part of your life, don't they, when you're writing it?
yeah, and I hear their voice, and I
Hmm.
wonder if you do as well,
Oh,
because
yeah. I feel like they become my friends to some extent. In the book I'm in, like the series, this particular series is it's a suspense romance. It's a clean. I love it's real fun. Anyway, so each one has its own story and it's got different characters. So each of the characters in this small town work their way through. So, but they come back because it's a police department. So it's, this investigator and that fingerprint guy and, the chief and all the different people. So each one had their own book. I get to know them in their own book, which is good. And I feel
it
like
is
I
good.
know everybody in this little small town right now.
Yeah, and I guess one of the memories I have is when I selected a voice for Walter the homeless man.
Hmm.
The narrator does a radio show. He's done quite a few books, and for the life of me, I can't think of his name right now. Uh, but he contacted me and he said I had to do like 3 retakes
Hmm.
at the end of the book because I was crying and choking up.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, wow, I did it.
I had to redo a couple of chapters in Jade because of that too. I found myself
Really?
choking up. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Hmm.
Hmm. Because you feel it. I mean, you bring on these characters and they become part of you.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, when I started writing Walter, I was, gosh, trying to figure out, I was probably in my 30s, early
Hmm.
30s,
Hmm.
and I had 50 pages basically.
Hmm.
And I was on a roll and I came home from work one night. No, I think I had 100 pages. I came home from work one night and my 3 sons, who were very young, they said, Mom, we have a surprise for you. Come in the bedroom. We cleaned your computer, Mom. And so that was a moment where you're like frozen because you can't get angry. You're looking at these angelic faces and you've been gone
Huh.
all evening at work and you're like,
Wow.
but so uh thankfully I had written a lot of it in a spiral notebook. And so when I became disabled, I joined a online group just to deal with everything that was going on in my life at the
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
And I posted a few chapters, and people started contacting me. Where can I get this? Is this available at Barnes and Noble? And I was like, this is all I have. I don't have any more of the book. And so that sat in my computer for so long
Hmm.
until, when I was homeless for that year, I would just, I had a friend in Washington State and I had no money and,
Hmm.
her birthday. And she would say, I don't care, just write me another chapter of Walter. And so it was like a story that I would sit down. My life was crazy. And then I would pick it back up and write a chapter or two. And
Which
we
in
would
some ways
discuss these.
mirrors Walter because his life was kind of crazy.
Yes. Now, what I did with that book was I did start hearing a little of my father's voice in Walter, which was my
Okay.
grandpa's name.
Hmm.
And I decided after writing pretty much the main characters to add my dad's family, his immediate siblings, and their spouses' names in the book. So, you know,
Hmm.
maybe there's a desk clerk lady or a secretary I'll name after an aunt and give her
Yeah,
characteristics, who's
I was
very
going to ask
minor.
that. Yeah, I was going to ask that too. How do you come up with your character names?
The character names are very interesting for me because I've even tried to change their names and I'm like that, but that's not their name.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's almost like you hear their name and then yeah, it's interesting that way. And I'm not really sure. It's a great question. But then if I have a name and then I realize, well, that's a family name and I don't want
Right.
to, you know, now with Walter, that was a whole different scenario because
Hmm.
I purposely wanted to just give the family a gift in the story. So,
So you don't necessarily have a plot all outlined and all neat and tidy. Just kind of start writing and let it happen. I've always wondered how that, because I want to be a writer. I'm not a writer, but I've always wanted to be able to. And any writing I've done has been technical stuff for school, so it was very outlined and very planned.
well, the birth of the story happened before I got sick and lost everything and was homeless a year. The birth of the story happened when I was 30. I left an abusive marriage with three children
Mhm.
and had nowhere to go and no money and no education and on with the nose. But my brother ended up getting divorced around that time period. And he was gracious enough to let me and my sons move in until I got on my feet, got an apartment, started
Mhm.
school, got back to work. And one night I was sitting on his couch and it was snowing. And I thought, what if I didn't have a brother? Where would I go? What if I had
Mhm.
no family and this happened to me? Where would I stay? And then I thought, what if I had no children? And if it was just me, because with children, you have to have shelter. And
Oh
at
yeah.
that time, I was still relatively healthy and I was young. I was in my
Hmm.
30s. And then it came to me, well, it's possible you could sneak in someone's house during the winter, possibly because I was just, and then I thought, well, what if the story was flipped and my brother was homeless, but I don't know him, and me and my children own this house, and he's out there and sees that I'm leaving every morning, and that's kind of, but other than
Hmm.
that, I had nothing. That was all I had.
Well, that's a pretty good start.
That was the start. The
It
man
just takes
that,
a little idea, a little spark of an idea, and then you just run from there.
yeah. So for viewers who haven't read Walter the Homeless Man, he sneaks into a single mother's home, a
Yeah.
widow, and he'll he'll have
And he
one
eventually
egg,
gets caught.
a little juice, take a shower, dry everything,
Right.
basically hiding out until she's coming back from work and they're coming back from daycare school, what have you. And so, yes, I think that is, I can tell you that that is exactly where that story was birthed. Now, polishing Jade, I started writing that in a spiral notebook, and
Wow.
I'm not really sure because in the title of the book was Cottonwood Farm until a year before I published it.
Okay. I was going to ask that because I love the title, especially with the little intro talking about what does
The
it take to
preface,
become polished jade. I guess it was a preface. Yeah.
yeah. So, when you're saving a document in your computer, sometimes you don't have a title. So I just was like,
Yeah.
I was writing about Cottonwood Farm that day.
Right.
And so that was the title. And somehow that kind of gets stuck in your head.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I was talking to an older friend on the phone who had read some of it. And she said, well, I think the title that you have is excellent. And I said, Cottonwood Farm. And she goes, no, Polishing Jade, the one you put in the intro.
Hmm.
And then I was like, it was there all the time. It
So
was right there.
did you visit where it's set in Braxton, Mississippi, or a place like it? Did you have that in mind, or did you just pick that place?
I don't think Braxton, Mississippi exists.
I didn't think
I
so. Yeah,
I don't
I
think
don't think
I've
if I looked it
ever
up.
I don't think I've ever been to Mississippi.
Okay. Because that's
Um,
something that you and I talked about when I did the characters was how strong of a Southern accent should I have?
mhm.
Because we decided we wanted to do it with an accent because she is set in the South. But at the same time, we didn't want to be so strong that it was in your face all the time, hopefully. Hopefully, I came across I'll call it a light accent. But because
You
there's so
did
many different
well.
dialects for the South. And so I tried to stick with a pretty standard Southern accent, but a light Southern accent, not too heavy.
Well, you did really well, but it's interesting because when I'm writing the story, I thought, well, I need a place that really had a lot of racial
Mm-hmm.
tension.
Sure.
And I knew
Given the
Mississippi
story.
did.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did a lot of research on that time period.
Mm-hmm.
And, I wanted Dylan to go to college. And so there were hours of research trying to find uh, a college at that time that was
Right.
predominantly Black, that was just, and
Right.
it, and there, there was a lot of research to Mississippi, but yeah,
I wondered, yeah.
I think I chose it because of racial tension.
Okay. That makes sense. Absolutely.
So no spoiler alerts.
Yeah, yeah, right. I don't want to give too much away because I think it's a great book. It's a wonderful story of redemption.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. That
I
means a
really
lot.
enjoy doing it. Yeah. And yeah.
Yeah, I enjoy, I'm not a audio person. Matter of fact, just watching teachings or videos or even listening to a book,
Hmm.
the way my brain works, which who knows how my brain works, but I start going in other places.
Hmm.
There may be one topic that I'm listening to or something they're speaking about, and I'll zoom in on that and I'll think, well, what was happening in 1986 in the middle of,
Right.
and then I'm off on, I need a history lesson or whatever it
I do
is.
that too.
And
I'm always off
so,
with my phone looking things up that I'm reading, not just on the books I'm recording, but books I read or books that I'm listening to. I'm always off checking stuff, looking because I go down rabbit holes. I think maybe more our generation. I don't know. You're younger than me.
well, you're a teacher and you're a researcher. I'm a teacher and a
Yeah,
researcher. And
right.
so
Maybe that's it.
I'm always down some rabbit hole or
I
up and
mean,
I
and
know.
you say you started writing in a spiral notebook. I think, wow, that's just not where our world is today, which is why audio has really taken off because kids, listen to me, kids, they're not kids. People in their 20s and 30s,
I
they're not
know, right?
kids. They're listening to more and more material. They're listening to websites. They're listening to articles. They're listening to books. They're listening to a lot of podcasts. I mean, that's just where everybody is. So it's so nice that we have voice acting to bring these books to life. And I'm
Yeah.
proud to be a piece of that.
Yeah. And, as you were talking, I was thinking about a couple things. One, I can probably, there will probably come a point in time where I can say, hey, grandkids, I used to write my own books. AI did not write them for me,
Right. Yeah.
nor did
That's
AI help me.
right.
But the other thing is I talk to women and they'll tell me I'm chopping my vegetables for dinner listening to your book.
Hmm.
Or we had to take a trip. It was 4 hours. We,
Yeah.
bought your audio version. And I do think that as, people there, how do I say this? Well, the market is so inflated right now with authors and audio
Hmm.
narrators, voice actors.
Well, COVID, I think, brought a lot of people out, and a lot of people thought, "Oh, I'm home now. I'm going to start recording." And they found out that it's not something you just do. You have to learn and get into and spend time at and hone your craft to keep moving forward. So I think a lot of those folks have dropped out that were busy during that time period, and now we're moving into the a different time period where maybe it won't be so glutted. We'll see.
So, before we wrap this up, can you tell our listeners how, if they enjoy listening to your audiobook, how can they help you?
Oh gosh. Reviews. Definitely. That's one thing that we need to have. It runs the algorithms, as we all know. Anybody who watches YouTube or goes on any social media knows what algorithms are. And the more hits you have on your stuff where somebody will leave you a review, that's going to get more people. It's going to get your name out there higher up on lists and your SEOs on your website, things like that. So, yeah, reviews. I'm on Audible. I'm on wherever you put your book because you're putting it on a number of platforms, which we should probably go over. But if you listen, please leave a review. Even if you don't like
Yes.
it, please leave a review because I want
Yes. Even if you don't like it, and explain why you didn't
why.
like it. And
Yes.
also, I think, there's a way to say, and I'll just use this for example. There's a way to give a review for Polishing
Yes.
Jade and say, I loved Lynn's voice. It was calming. Her characters were well developed. I could hear the tones, the inflections, whatever.
Right. Whatever. Yeah.
But as for Tekoa Manning, I didn't really like this, or I loved this. I mean, you can,
Right.
so
Or vice
I
versa.
think,
But
yeah, or vice versa. But
but the thing
people
is,
don't,
they need to leave them on Audible and on Amazon because they're technically separate entities, even though they're owned by the same company. Because the Audible ones get the narrator's reviews, and the Amazon is more for the author. So I would
yeah,
say if
and
you listen to it, put it on Audible. If you read it, put a review on Amazon. It helps both of us
right. And
or wherever.
here's the other thing. Don't get caught up in, I don't know what to say. I'm not good at this. It could be one sentence and
Yeah.
the stars. I mean, basically, if you
Yes.
click 4 or 5 stars, you're really helping us. 5 is what we want,
Of
but
course.
but we know, we're not always going to be everybody's cup of tea. But
Right.
here's the thing: if you are just too intimidated, don't feel like you can write something out, you know, just write a sentence or two. I
Right.
really enjoyed this audio book, and the narrator did a wonderful job. It
Hmm.
doesn't have to be,
Yeah, it could be that simple.
and also if you're busy and you've only listened to half of the book, you you can still leave
I'm
a
pretty sure you
review.
can. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I think you have to listen to at least a part of it. But
Yeah,
I'll
you
tell you
have to listen.
the best comment I can get is I wasn't distracted by the narrator. I was able to listen to the story. That's my
Well,
goal.
well, I think when we were talking after or while you were working on Polishing Jade, I had voiced to you that it had been a long time since I'd read the book. I
Hmm.
stay super busy just like everybody else.
Sure.
And when you sent the recordings, I remember just laying in bed enjoying the story, and I had forgotten what I wrote or
Hmm.
what had happened, and each character was so,
That's good.
done so well. I forgot that you were the narrator. I mean, I was just
That's what we're looking for. We don't want
right.
to. I mean, yes, I'd like you to be able to say, yes, I like this narrator. I mean, I have favorite narrators. I'll listen to something just because I know I love that narrator. But then I just
Yes.
get lost in the story, and that's what I'm hoping for with people, that they'll get lost in the story. That's what matters to me.
Yes. I agree. And that's what I want. So, well, did you have any
Yeah.
other questions or things you wanted to share
Hmm.
before we close up?
No, and I mean, I have a list of questions that were possible questions, but we've talked through a lot of them already. I mean, I'm not looking at it all that much. I had another author or another narrator, 'cause she knew I was going to be talking to you. She had asked me, because she's trying to become a writer to some extent, and she wondered about the plot thing. But do you make yourself write every single day? This is from my friend. Do you sit down and like I make myself write for an hour or two? I know some writers that just write, free write every day, no matter what.
There are, wow, there are times during the month, and I don't know if it has to do with the moon.
Probably.
I'm more creative.
Hmm.
My advice would be, if the juices are flowing, keep writing. It
Hmm.
could be hours. If they're not, why?
Yeah.
If they're not, and one of the things that so many authors, in my opinion, they get stuck with trying to start writing their novel or memoir or whatever they're working on, and they're going back and they're editing and they're going back and thinking of a word that would her hat was lovely, no, her hat was, and
Right.
they're on and with all these things that no, that's not what you want to do. You want to get this story out of you.
Hmm.
And then the hard part is when, and this because editing is a difficult period for you as well.
Yes.
But you have to get the story out
Hmm.
first. And sometimes if you get stuck, it's okay to say, well, I'm going to delete those last three chapters because I now see that I want to take the story in this direction.
Hmm.
And this family I added, I don't think they're going to work in the story. It's okay. You might cringe when you're hitting the back button, but
Yes.
and so what I usually do is I get to know my characters and
Hmm.
I think about, well, what would they do?
Right. Right.
And, you know, don't get hung up with the small stuff. Hopefully, God willing, I'm going to be starting doing some one on one writing coaching. I
Good.
have one client that I'll be working with in April. So my goal is to get maybe for just one day a week, really
Hmm.
spend one-on-one time. So uh, if she's interested or he or whoever, because so many people, I think they don't know their audience
Hmm.
and they don't really know.
That's a really important thing. I keep this right here on my computer. Who is your audience? Because
Yeah.
every book is different, and you have to keep that in mind as you're working.
Yeah, and I think, that's one of the reasons why I'm thinking about taking a detour and having some other pen names
Mm.
just because why not? Life's short.
Sure.
And I'm, I just finished a poetry book that I haven't published yet. It's was entered into a contest with a book publishing company in my hometown in Louisville, Kentucky. So I'm waiting on that. But the books Tekoa Manning writes
Hmm.
are different than a poetry book. And
Right.
so, if you have an audience that you're envisioning, also do the research and see what's popular right now.
Hmm.
And I hate to say that because I'm all about creativity, but
Well, there's still a market. Unfortunately, there's a certain amount of creativity, but then you have to always go back to it's still a business. I hate to say it. You have to please the masses in order to
mhm,
keep the business going, that part of it. And then that frees you up to do the little passion projects.
yes. And then sometimes people will bring me a book that they're working on and the title, and I'll get on Amazon and there could be 15 books already with that
With that
title.
title. Yeah.
So there's just there's a lot involved. Just like
Hmm.
we don't understand everything that goes behind the scenes in your career, just the
Right.
editing, I'm sure. How
Oh
many
yeah. Well,
hours?
one thing for people to understand is that for every hour you listen to, I've probably spent three making it. At least. And that's after experience. When you first start out, most beginning narrators who have to do everything themselves because we can't afford to send it out in the beginning, um, 4 or 5 hours for every 1 hour you're listening to. But now I'm down to about maybe two to 2.5 for every 1 hour because I've gotten better. I've gotten faster. And some of it I'm hiring out now, some of the editing, because the editing is very tedious. Not that I can't do it, I know how, but I'd much rather be narrating than editing. So,
Well, see,
but then
that's
I'm
my
paying somebody.
yeah, I would much rather be writing than editing and
Right.
the other thing is some of the books, especially my Unmasking the Unseen series,
Hmm.
some of those books were not hours, they were years of
I'm
research.
sure because I remember how detailed they were. We got another one coming out eventually soon. I hope that
Yes,
before
King
it's being
revealed.
revealed. So yeah,
Yes,
there's a
but
lot involved in those.
just the first one, Satan Unmasked, just going through
Hmm.
every verse in the entirety of the Bible, taking it back to getting to the
Hmm.
root,
And
looking
looking
at,
at idioms and metaphors and not just the fact that it says this word here. It's not just a word study. You got to get the essence of what it means. Yeah.
yeah, so I think, that's the other thing. If you love what we're doing, we want to hear from you. And we welcome reviews, we welcome sharing,
Hmm.
and also let people know how they can get a hold of you, where they can find you at. And you have a wonderful quote there that defines your voice.
Oh, yeah. Well, there was work involved in figuring all that out, but
What
um
is it again?
my tagline is I'm a friendly voice in a chaotic world.
I love it.
Let me do it
It's
in my narrator
perfect.
voice. A friendly voice in a chaotic world.
I love it. Oh, I
Not in the
almost
teacher
heard
voice.
Mary Poppins.
Well, it just depends on the character. I could be a friendly voice in a chaotic world, if you'd like.
It is acting,
It
it
is.
really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Well, what does Shakespeare
Um,
say? All the
all the
world's a
world's a
stage.
stage. And all the men and women merely players.
Yes. So one of the things that I also wasn't sure if you were still doing, so I don't want to throw it out there if you're
Oh,
not. And I know
yeah.
that you have a break coming up that you're going to be taking.
Yes.
But let's say somebody contacted you and they had a fiction novel and they wanted to use their voice. How
Ah,
can you
yes.
help them?
Okay, I've actually done this once. The book's not out, so I can't really plug it in any way. But I had the author himself come to my booth, and now I live out in the sticks. That's got to be. I live out in the country, and it's got to be known that much. But I've built a studio with a booth inside, and I have really good sound in here. I've had it checked by professionals, and I've got all the equipment. I know how to edit. I know how to record. So what we did was he sat here, and I sat next to him. I directed him as he did the book, and then I edited and put it all together and made it into a viable recording that can be put on ACX or on Audible and any of the other platforms that like Spotify. There's a lot of platforms out there that can take the book. So he's now got a finished product, and I just charged him a per finished hour rate. So unfortunately, because I live in the sticks, you have to know that you're either staying in a hotel or you're staying in a house with three cats because that's what I have.
Well, I still think
But
that that is a wonderful,
yeah,
there are people they want their voice for their grandchildren, for
yeah.
their children, for their audience that knows them.
Right.
And
But
I just
if
love,
somebody would ever want to work on that with me, I would definitely we'd have to talk plenty ahead and there's prep that has to be done because it's not just sitting down and talking into a mic. That's what people
right.
think it is. There's a little more to it than that. So, if you're interested, I would love to help you do something anybody, any author that would like to do their own voice. There's something about leaving your voice as a legacy.
So let's say that someone is working on their novel or they've just completed it or they're looking for someone to narrate it. Where can they find you? What is your
Okay.
email?
Yeah, easy. Well, my website is my name, Lynn Brunk, not with Marie. Marie is just my because it flows. Lynn Marie Brunk, but it's lynnbrunk.com. Very simple. The business name is Horizon Wordcraft Productions, but my email is Horizon Wordcraft, all one word, I'm sorry, at Gmail. Horizon Wordcraft at Gmail. So you can always contact me there. Um, on my website, there's a contact me. There's a form you can fill out and I will get that and I can get back with you there. If you can always email me, however you want to get a hold of me. Um, I'd rather not give up my phone number probably. I'm also on Facebook. I'm technically on Instagram, but I don't really go there much. But you can always
I,
get me on Messenger, Facebook
okay.
Messenger. And I think that's the majority of it. Yeah. Now, if you already got the book done and it's already put into an e format, you want to get on what's called ACX, which is the artistic creative exchange that Amazon runs. It's a good place to start, and that's a place where you can either ask me to audition or ask me to do the book, or you can put it out for auditions, and any narrator who's on the platform can audition for you. Be
Yeah.
wary, you'll get 50 to 200 auditions for every book.
Yes. But when you know.
Yeah,
And I remember listening to so many different people,
mhm,
their voice, but instantly I was like, this is the guy for Walter.
right. And
This
that's
is
just
who
it. It is about a match. That's really and truly it's a little match. Oh, and side note, if you want to go on my website, I have samples on there of other genres that I'm doing. So you can find me there and listen to them, download samples and listen to them.
yeah, and they're done so well, guys. Just go to her website, click the little arrows. You can listen to each different genre and
Mhm.
you can hear the different voices
I'm
that
pretty sure
Lynn
Polishing Jade's on there, I think, for my Southern accent one. I
probably,
think it is.
yeah.
Haven't looked
So,
lately.
well, Lynn, it has been such a pleasure to have you on Manning the Gate
Yes.
Publishing and sharing all your expertise and knowledge that you have.
It's been an
And
honor to work with you. It really has.
well, it's just one of those divine appointments, I
Mhm.
think.
Yes.
And the beautiful thing is, it's become a great friendship.
Yeah.
And that might not happen for everyone, but
I have
what
authors I've never met, I've never even seen their face that I've worked with. So this is a unique relationship and I love it.
I do too. It's been such a blessing. And so, anyway, thanks guys for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the program. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments section. We love and appreciate you all. Shalom. Bye bye.
Shalom.